Awesome.
Welcome, everybody. I'd,
Welcome.
li-
Thank you.
I'd like to welcome you all to the presentation by Dr. Magnus Jansson, PMP. He has 32 years of work experience in global companies spanning 6 countries, with leadership as engineering manager, sales support manager, and a certified project manager, which is the PMP. His entire career has been in large global and multicultural organizations in the heavily regulated food industry. Dr. Jansson served on the board of directors for Toastmasters International, a global organization focused on communication and leadership focused on communication and leadership development. Dr. Jansson learned that leading in a volunteer organization differs from managing in the corporate world. To be successful in a volunteer organization, one must adopt a focus on motivating and influencing as opposed to directing. Stewardship and service replaced a tendency to direct people. These experiences, combined with a doctorate in global leadership, also refined and reinforced Dr. Jansson's global mindset. This presentation is on Dr. Jansson's experiences and his leadership challenges a project manager is exposed to. Many articles are written about failures in projects. The Project Management Institute reports that in 2020, only 72% of projects met original goals and 52% were completed on time. When you get challenged to close a factory for 9 days to rebuild the heart of the operation and an expectation to start up flawlessly, the pressure is on. Failure is not an option. The role of a project manager is to deliver on expectations. And so now, please welcome Dr. Magnus Jansson, PMP, for Leadership Under Pressure, Lessons Learned from a Successful Project Implementation.
Thank you for that, Dr. Walker, and welcome everyone. Welcome to this little short and brief presentation. I've mentioned earlier that this could go for 30 minutes, it could go for 3 hours. There's so much we can talk about, but unfortunately I only got the 20-minute mark here to work with. So let me start in that case and say, well, in case you have other things to do, I will start with the end, the conclusion. And just remember, you need to plan. You need to have the right resources. You need to build rapport and trust. You need to communicate, and you need to build a sense of team. Now when you know the end, let's start with the beginning. And I would like to start with a definition of leadership. Now, leadership is not necessarily the easiest thing in the world to pinpoint exactly. And back in 1974, Ralph Studgell said there are almost as many definitions of leadership as there are persons who have attempted to define the concept. This was in 1974. We're in 2021, and we're still struggling finding a common denominator. There are many different versions of leadership definitions. So we go in and say that I'm subscribing more to a model where leadership is really a combination of the leader, the follower, and the context. The context at this point in time is likely more important than what we typically give it credit. We focus on the leader. But I would say let's focus on the context. And I'm saying, going back, if leadership results from a combination of the leader, the follower, and the context, then context defines necessary leadership styles. Context determines preferred leader attributes, and context frames vital follower characteristics. Therefore, context becomes critical. And I will talk more about context, where I'm going with everything here. And we have to understand as well, a project team is a temporary organization recruited for a determined undertaking. So you're leading a temporary organization of individuals that you don't have a formal authority over, but you still have a task to complete. And that's a little part of the context of leading in a project team. Additional context, I work in the food manufacturing industry. And the food manufacturing industry, normally people don't think too much about, because food is always on our tables, food is in the store, food gets there. We don't necessarily think of where it comes from or how we put it together. However, I've hired people in the past where I'm putting everything in context to people in the food industry, that really, if we do something wrong, then you may die, or you might get sick. So the stakes are high, even if we don't think of it. I have two examples shown on this slide. And the Blue Bunny ice cream, there was a listeria outbreak a few years ago, and people in nursing homes passed away. And Peanut Corporation of America had a salmonella outbreak about 10, 12 years ago. Multiple people died of salmonella. The issue with Peanut Corporation of America was that the CEO knew about the products, and they still put it out in the store shelves. He is now in a 26-year prison term. So context, food industry. If you do something wrong, severely wrong in the food and manufacturing industry, people might feel ill, get ill, or worst case, they die. So there's a pressure that is always on us. And context, additional context, project management, we have constraints. Now, if this was a presentation related to the Project Management Institute, I would have to go in and describe that this is not an agile process that I'm using. I'm using a waterfall process, which means everything is defined. There's a beginning and there's an end, and everything follows a logical step, whereas which is typical for a capital investment project. Now, agile, I'm not going to go into the details, it's more iterative, and you have an end goal, but you have sub goals that you reach, and you might change the scope to fit. Now, we cannot do agile in a capital investment environment, because the scope, the schedule, the cost, and really the quality, benefits, and risks, they are all defined, especially the scope. We know what the scope is. The schedule, I mentioned we had 9 days to do this. I'll get a little bit more to those constraints. And the cost, there is a framework. I cannot go over a certain budget. So we are very constrained in what we can do. And additional context, this factory. Now, the factory was built in 1998. It's got aging equipment. It's a food processing facility. Production runs 24/7, and it's very limited time for any downtime. The only downtime that we typically have available are Sundays, which means all projects have to be implemented on Sundays with the holiday pay, which means cost will increase. The time constraint is in there because you cannot get access to the factory until 8 a.m. on Sunday, and you have to be done by 6 p.m. And you try to fit things in there and still expecting the factory to start up flawlessly on Monday morning, but this is not what we're talking about here. The 9-day downtime window. Now, really, the contractors said they needed 14 days. They needed 14 days to complete the scope. And we walked up to the executives and presented 14 days. Here's the detailed schedule. This is what we're going to do. And they say, fine, I see your schedule. You got 9 days. Okay, what do we do? What do we do? I'll get to that because that's part of the pressure here. Additional constraints that were put on us is that this factory is in a remote area. Nearest largest city is 45 minutes away, which means most of the contractors drive between 45 minutes to an hour and a half to get to site. it's winter, this is February, which means the 45 minutes to an hour and a half drive for contractors now, we have winter conditions. We got COVID. The COVID hit shuts down the project completely. And extended downtime, if we go longer, will negatively affect the inventory level. So now I've built up the overall environment and the context that this project had to work in. Now, let's stay on the first page and focus on the lessons learned. In projects, you go through phases. The first phase after you've initiated your project is a planning stage. And after planning, you're going to execution, monitoring, and controlling. So it all starts in the planning stage. And the lessons learned here is that whatever you plan, the more detailed you plan, the more likely the end result is going to be there. The end result is clear. We know we got 9 days. We know what things we need to do. We're shutting down the heart of the operation. If this doesn't work, the factory will not run and we will be in trouble. Well, it's a company will be in trouble and we will probably have to explain a thing or two. Why didn't it happen? So you don't want to be in that situation. It's not like when you build the Sydney Opera House and you're 14 years behind schedule. They were only 10 years behind schedule and 1,400% over budget. It's nothing like that, but still the planning. So what we did here was getting everyone involved, and the role of the leader in the planning stage is to get engagement from everyone. And this is the key. This is a leadership focused speech. So what is the role of the leader during the planning? And that is to get the engagement and the buy-in from all the stakeholders or everyone who is involved in this project. And that goes for the mechanical contractor, the electrical contractor, the building contractor, our own engineering staff, the factory staff. Everyone needs to be aligned on a schedule. And when we got the my contractors presented the 14 days, and I went back and said, yes, the good thing is we're getting the downtime. The bad thing is we're getting 9 days. What can you do? And what I see here, we haven't planned out the 24 hours. And we worked together, got back to the drawing board. The role of the leader here is to set the goal, but let them find the solution. I'm there to help and support and not leading and directing here at this point in time. I can go in and say, you have to work 24/7. You have to have multiple shifts working. We're gonna work from Friday morning till the next Sunday. And this is what you have to do. I could do that and give them a schedule and say, you are going to follow that. Now, the rhetorical question for that is, what would be the likelihood of a success coming out of it if I dictate and tell them at that point in time that this is what is necessary? And my answer to that is the likelihood is very low. However, if they bring their solutions to the table and say, this is what I can do, this is how we're going to do it, this is what is going to happen on day-to-day, on the day-to-day level, then again, we have a higher chance of succeeding. And that's what we did. Second part, the planning. Planning is essential, but you need to get the engagement. The role of the leader here is to get everyone engaged, everyone to work on the schedule, everyone work on the tasks, and everyone basically signing off and saying, yes, we can do this. And that's what happened. The role of the leader here also is to hold everything else back, because you don't want to add additional tasks to something that is already has constraints. Now, that's plenty of pushback that you have to do, but you have to, as a leader, you have to stand up, be strong, and say, if you want this, this is what we can do. You will be challenged in have you stretched yourself far enough? And the second part there in the planning is always have a plan B. And we worked on the plan B. And once we had agreed on a plan B, I said, okay, now we need a plan B for plan B. So planning, get the engagement, do a plan B, and have a plan B for plan B. Now you're setting yourself up for a higher likelihood of success. And again, the role of the leader is to get the team to bring that to the table. Resources, you must have the right resources. Again, if they're not signing up to what you want them to do, if you don't have the right resources, the likelihood of you succeeding is going to be less. And also, not only do you need to have the right resources, in a constrained, high pressure situation like this, you need to have more resources than what you think you need. And what we did, we had idle resources available on site that could jump in and be a part of the plan B and the plan B to plan B. We had more resources than what we needed. And again, that's part of the planning. Rapport and trust. You have to build up a sense of team. Well, that's the end here, but rapport and trust. You have to have the trust from everyone. And you have to take a step back and you have to work on that. You have to work on the relation building. Now, you know it's a remote area, and even further remote. I'm a project manager and I'm located in Indianapolis, and this factory is a 14-hour drive away. So all the rapport building I could do before we got to site was through phone calls and discussions. It's challenging, but you as a leader need to focus on getting the rapport and trust from the remote staff that you're going to put together, because once you get together and go into execution, there is no time to take a step back and say, we need to replan this. No, you have to execute plan B and plan B to plan B. The role of the leader changes completely when you get into the execution, because it will be more leading and directing. You will be more authoritarian. You will be following up schedules. You will hold people accountable. Everything that we have agreed on before, when you have everyone getting involved in the planning, now it's execution. Now you're making sure that we're doing what we said we were going to do. Communicate. You have to communicate. That goes without saying. Leadership is about communication. You need to have the upwards communication. You have executives that are nervous. They gave you 9 days. They want to know how well you are performing, and they want to know day by day, where are you? Are you on track or are you not? And what we did, we had an 8 a.m. powwow with everyone where we went through, this is what we're planning on doing today. And yesterday, we accomplished the following tasks. And the highest risk that we have today is, and we, for each function group, we focused on the risk. And we said, well, what's the highest risk item that you're doing today? What will maybe make you not go home today because you are in an accident? What's the highest risk maneuver? And you're showing them that you care by putting that in front of them and say, hey, I want you to survive this. I want you to be able to go home. I want you to be able to be healthy. It's really a high focus there. Not only that we want you to complete the task, but we also care for you. And that indirectly also, and the communication, still a little bit on the communication. In the afternoon, we sent out an email to all the executives with pictures and told them, where are we? What's the state? Are we on track? Where are the risks? Do we foresee that we will not be successful? Focus, focus, focus. And then sense of team. Finally, it's a matter of things go wrong. We all make mistakes. Every day, there are things that are going wrong. And if you go in with the attitude of this is a blame game, then you cannot necessarily get the team to feel comfortable. So it's a matter of, yes, you're bringing things to the table that went wrong, and we're just going to focus on the solution. it's solutions oriented at this point in time during the execution, monitoring, controlling phase. We are not interested in the blame game. You're part of the team. Yeah, I know you're a different company, but we're part of the team. We're part of a solution. Let's work together. So we have to build that sense of team, that everyone have the trust, the rapport and trust to bring issues forward in a good way. And there's the leadership role during the execution, that not only are you directing and guiding everyone, but you're also taking that step back, and you become more a mentor or a problem solver. So overall, these lessons are from a very narrow, small project implementation, where ideally what really came together here was a good planning with everyone involved. Everyone bought into it. Everyone jumped when something happened. Everyone worked together. And that is part of the, or the major part of project management, and especially in a remote team with people that come together for 9 days. We are a team, and after those 9 days, we go back and we do other things. It's challenging, and especially with the pressure you have on you, because the executives will always ask you. The factory manager was part of the meetings, and asking and looking and monitoring and making sure we were doing the same right thing. So high focus, high pressure. The key for a project manager at that point in time is to remain calm. Because if you are not calm, if you are starting to panicking, they're going to look at you. And if they see you panic, they're going to start panicking as well. So if something goes wrong, be calm, be sensible about it, and focus on the solution and bring people together. Stop the blame game. Don't point finger to anyone. Don't say that, well, you screwed up. Excuse my language. That has nothing to do with what you do as an effective project manager when you're under pressure. You have to stay calm under pressure, because all the eyes are on you, and you have to lead, and they are going to follow your lead. Again, leadership under pressure. That's project management 101. Thank you, and back to you, Dr. Walker, or Mr. Fasal.
Thank you so much. I mean, this was amazing. Thank you for the share. So let's see if we have any questions from anybody. I don't see any questions yet. I'll ask a question. So is this, I guess, project like these, do they often happen in this particular industry?
I would say yes. I would say that any project where you're going in and making modifications inside a factory, whether that is changing components or parts of a production line, or it's mostly the modifications or changes, not when you're installing a complete new line. Then you have time, you can plan it out. This type of project is if you're changing packaging format, for example, you go from a 12-pack to a 6-pack, you have to change a machine, or you have to change something inside the facility. And the factory is, most food factories, this is a low margin industry in general. So you need to produce. Every time you stop, then you're starting to see losses. So they're not going to give you the amount of time that you really need. And you really have to argue for it. And you really have to go in and work hard on making sure that you are dead sure that when you go in and you do it, you have to be precise. And again, as I said earlier, failure here is not an option. So planning, 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 and having the right resources. That is the key.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jansson. I believe Anastasia has a question for us.
Hi, thank you. I wanted to say thank you to Magnus for his presentation. That was a good one, and he hit all the salient points in project management. As a project manager, I can tell you that, yes, project management 101 is you as a leader being calm, even when there are so many risks and issues on a project and everybody is looking to you. And another thing that he also said was about not dictating to the team what they should do. You don't want to give them the answers. You want to empower them to come up with the answers, because that's the way you're going to get success out of them. So yes, he did mention all the salient points. And I think somebody was asking about the planning phase, and I can just chime in and say that it depends on each project and how much risk is involved and how much planning you want to do to make sure you have something to fall on plan B to the plan B. So that's my contribution. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So yes, so Tom had a question. Would like to see more details of planning phase. How far in advance should an initial planning meeting be held? Are all members of the team present?
That's an excellent question. I can give you an answer based on what we did for this February shutdown. And that February shutdown was, we started planning that in August or September last year. It's a slow progress. I would say if I want to give a rule of thumb here, at least 3 months, because we have to go through iterations. You have to go through iterations and understanding and turning all these different angles. 3 to 6 months planning, if you have that, you can put together a very good plan for executing. And going back to your initial question there, Mr. Fasal, is this common in the food industry? And it is. We have a year typically to plan, purchase the equipment and do the planning. But going into, Tom, starting the implementation planning, I would say at least 3 months in advance, and get everyone well focused on the task. And the closer you get to it, the more frequent you go in and talk about the details. Initially, I can just briefly tell you right now, I'm in the middle of the planning phase for something that is going to be implemented in September or October in the project that I'm working. And we're building up agreements at this point in time. This is how we're going to work together. This is how we're going to execute it. And planning is, we have a weekly meeting, and it's going to be very detailed again, down to day by day, almost hour by hour, on what we're going to do in September, October.
That's great. Thank you. Karen had a question. How do you build rapport remotely? What do you say during the calls?
Excellent question, Karen. I think you know how I always start the conversation, and it's saying that this is the best day ever. Now, that diffuses everyone, seriously. The statement, it's the best day ever, is not the key. It's you're choosing an attitude. You're choosing an attitude that is consistent, and you're approaching people friendly. My attitude, it's the best day ever. And everyone in the team adopted that, to be honest. They were smiling, they were happy, they were working 12, 14 hours a day. Every time I saw them out on the floor, they knew what I was going to say, so they didn't do anything, then they were happy, right? So how do you build rapport remotely? I think it's just to be friendly and give yourself out and be a little vulnerable. Best day ever, Karen. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you for that. One more question. What do you do when there is a major conflict on the team and you have got such a short window of time to get these things done? So how do you work with conflict?
There will be conflicts. Conflicts drive everything forward. We know that. But it depends on what type of conflict it is. We don't have time to go down in too deep of a conflict. We can have differences of opinion, but you have to, at this point in time, the project manager will be very authoritarian, and it will be this way. And if you don't like it, we are all going to remove you from the project. It's as what shall I say, harsh as that, because you don't have time to, in 9 days, to start building something and go and sit down and slow down. There is not that time. And it's part of the planning as well. You are planning this in advance so you can avoid going into the situation, because once you are in a major conflict, maybe the entire team falls apart. Well, you haven't built the sense of team, you haven't built the rapport and trust at that point in time. So you're also relying on the contractor supervisor or the contractor's main contact to make sure that we have the right resources in place, because they're part of the planning. So my answer here is major conflict. Yeah, if it's major, we have to remove that individual and get an alternative resource in. We don't have time to address it in any other way, but ideally you plan for it in advance so you don't get to that point.
Thank you for that, Dr. Jansson. We have a question here. Any international or cross-culture aspect to watch out for in the process of coping with such situation?
That is an excellent question. Now, the company I work for is an international company. It's headquartered in Canada, actually, which means that all the executives are Canadians, and you have to communicate on, let's say, their terms. You have to understand as a project manager, what kind of communication do I need to take to that level? And what are they looking for? And again, I'm going to take that step back and say, you have to have this and address that in your planning stage. How do I communicate in that direction? And if you look at other cross-cultural aspects, yes, now I'm in one part of the country and there's a project implementation in another part of the country. You have to, as a project manager, educate yourself on, well, what are the differences I'm going to see here? Because each state in the United States is slightly different from a cultural perspective. And it's not like you as a project manager, you go in and you expect everyone to follow your lead. Well, you do when you're task oriented and you focus on the tasks, but you also have to adapt yourself to whatever environment is there. So it's not so sure I'm giving you an exactly good answer to that, but what I'm
Yeah, well, I guess the cultural differences within the United States and even between the United States and Canada may be very close compared to, you know, other cultural gaps. Say I'm joining here from Japan, but
yes,
we don't have so much nut allergies here.
yes,
You know, so we have different types of allergies that are sort of critical.
Yeah.
But you know, this time of sort of you know, emergency, the sense of how can I say, the seriousness or, you know, sense of emergency might be different.
yes,
So building rapport in grasping this, you know, the sense of emergency
Right.
might be more difficult than one might think. between Canada and the United States. I just thought you might have has a similar, that sort of experience.
Well, I've been exposed to working with people from Japan and from other cultures in my other line of work, and yes, I understand it. We take things differently depending on where our background comes from, and again, we have to find ways to merge things together and understand each other in this short time frame. So.
I guess building rapport and the sense of teamwork probably is the most core process that you need to go through.
Yeah, well, I would tend to agree with you there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone. So I know we are on time right now. Is it okay if we ask you one last question before we let you go?
You can ask questions for the next 8 hours. I don't know.
That's great. So I'll ask one last one. So how would these ideas differ when we're working with volunteer organization? And this question was from Tom.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate that. The rapport and trust and sense of team would be similar in the volunteer organization based on my experience. That you have to open yourself up and you have to just be vulnerable, be yourself. The other ideas where I'm talking about how you lead and direct when you're executing. In a volunteer organization, you cannot go in and be authoritarian, to be honest, because volunteers are there voluntarily and you have no power over them. If you look at the 5 different powers that we can exhibit over people, the only power that you can work on there is the referent power. I mean, you just have to show yourself and you have to put the best foot forward. And it's that piece there, Tom, is similar to what you do in the business setting here in the beginning when you're getting everyone to participate. But in the volunteer organization, I know you also know this, Tom, that there are people that are not going to accept what you do, and there's nothing you can do about it other than you have to take it. And they're going to, I'm almost going to say, rip you apart. I was trying to be kind there, but they will. And I think both you and I, Tom, have experienced that in the volunteer organization, even Karen, I think. And Lou, yes, forgot about Lou, yes. Sorry, Lou.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for participating. And thank you, Dr. Jansson, for wonderful time with us. And thank you, our ALP team. So I just wanted to kind of give a quick reminder and a shout out that we do every last Thursday of the month, we have a leadership speakers, and our next one will be coming up in June. So please make sure you hit us up on LinkedIn and we'll send you the invite. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great evening.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.